morning. Sorry, not to have arrived sooner. I see that you are about 50. Well, I'm going to speak in Spanish, but I can answer in English if you so wish. I'm going to sum up what we know scientifically about medicinal cannabis. First of all, what are the needs of the requirements of the patients? Before speaking of medicine or science, I'd like to speak about the ethics. As it was said before, all the citizens should be entitled to, of course, know, be educated, and be able to self-medicate. Self-medication as it is defined by the WHO. And patients who are suffering from chronic diseases, which are weakening and are now consuming, for example, medical cannabis. Cannabis is no panacea, not at all. But cannabis has nevertheless therapy applications, at least for the patients. It is a very complex substance. Over the past 20 years, we have increased our knowledge on the active components of this plant and the thiol, CBD, and so on, how they are active in our bodies. The effects have been, of course, those who are not necessarily desirable, and we try to really work on it. And we can now design therapies which may increase the efficiency and reduce, of course, the secondary effects or negative effects. We can, of course, reshuffle the substances within the plant. There has been quite a lot of clinical studies which have been made in the past 20 years. You know very well that the effects which have been better defined, and they focus on two major areas, neurology and oncology, as it is summed up here on the slide. For example, the active principles of cannabis can, of course, calm down the sufferings and, of course, inhibit the various epilepsies, epileptical crisis. As for the cancer, of course, also the sufferings are the pain is being decreased, as well as vomiting, and also the loss of weight can be better controlled with cannabis. There are other areas where there has been quite a lot of research, but the impact is not necessarily completed. Now, the cannabis can be really useful for patients who are suffering from other diseases than oncology or neurological diseases. For example, musculoskeletal diseases are particularly prone to accept and certainly can be better treated with cannabis. But the first way, scientific way, in fact, ended up with two drugs. It's Medicinal, which is being approved by the FDA, which is the more biooptimum component of the cannabis, and one which is Lanabilona, which is very, very, very efficient. But these studies were very relevant at the time. They were relevant so that cannabis could be increasingly respected among scientists, among the clinicians. A number of clinical studies have been made in various phases, and these were approved by the FDA. So concept was developed. All these substances can be really, really efficient. It was recognized as such, more particularly to treat cancer and other neurological diseases. nevertheless, they don't satisfy most requirements of the patients nowadays, because these are pure components, and they have no other components of the plant, which might increase or decrease the tolerability. It's very difficult sometimes to define a window which would be very efficient for the patient. It's very difficult to clearly define doses which be adequate, which be appropriate, which really would have eradicate or remove all the negative effects. And all this makes probably very difficult to define the therapies. But it's true that we have progress, but we can't, for the time being, satisfy all the requirements because of insufficient work on the substance. This one, which has been studied, sativa is approved by the Agency for Medicines in Europe, and it is used in multiple sclerosis and also types of cancer, more particularly in Canada. Yes, certainly improve other therapies because it incorporates the CBD plus other components have an impact and certainly alleviate the various other negative effects of cannabis. Satibex is satisfying the requirements of most of the patients for different reasons, pharmacological reasons. It is a good ratio between the 1:1 between the substances. It's really very efficient to treat multiple sclerosis and psychosis, convulsions, and so on. It's important to have a higher component, a higher content of CBD. It is a spray, and it is, of course, very interested to nose spray. It certainly helps in cases of convulsions and so on. In third place, Sativex is certainly giving another chemiotypical substance, and it may be very interesting for a number of patients who need to rest, for example, or need to sleep. It is certainly, it helps to calm down the person, and it's very important in the case of cancers. And it may, in other cases, in other substances, they may, of course, have a very negative effect. Some suffering from cancer really are suffering from what? They are receiving a therapy. And certainly this is one substance which may really help. Well, on this basis, I must say over several years in Canada, Israel, a third way has emerged. The raw preparations of cannabis, different agents or different preparations such as oils. These preparations, of course, are more difficult to analyze than, of course, the various medicines which are approved officially. But what is a disadvantage may become an advantage because this preparation certainly makes it possible to refine, to individualize the treatment of the patients. These various preparations based on cannabis make it possible to give different ratios between the two substances which are contained in the cannabis and make them more tolerable or better tolerated by the patient. There are also different ways of administration, for example, spray or oils, which is a slow way of administration, and also some are more calming down, relaxing, others are more euphoria-oriented, and it makes it possible, as I said, to make the substance more tolerable, better tolerated by the patients, and the cost is much lower. All this program on cannabis and medicinal medical cannabis is certainly developing now, and there are 13 variables which are being taken into consideration. The balance between the two substances within the cannabis. There are 13 different ratios, in fact, within the cannabis between the two great components, spray as well, and other ways such as oils. It all depends what is, of course, the patient suffering from cancer or not. And also it may be used for children in pediatry, in other words, and it can really help substantially, and we can really develop this program even further down in order to be able to use them probably more widely. I said it before, it's not a panacea indeed, but it has an impact which is very significant, more particularly in neurology and oncology. Some medications which are being used, and standard medications, may have a great efficiency. It is clear that in several occasions, or there are a number of preparations which are better tolerated than the cannabis as such. For example, all the work which is being done now on anxiety is really promising. It's already giving very good effect. Cannabis may be very useful also for several patients. Patients who do not respond very well to the standard medication, do not tolerate these medications. Patients who have quality of life which is very unbalanced, which is really challenged with other medications. So we can really change the effects, and it may be very relevant for a number of patients. Canadian, Israeli programs. There are about 400,000 patients now treated in this manner, and it is 0.3% of the population in these countries who are being treated this way. It would be 1.8 million of patients here in Europe who could take advantage of this medicinal cannabis. We really believe that it is high time to cope with this problem very clearly and to solve the problems on the way to the use of this substance.